Hello po. Magandang araw mga guro ng Kaagapay Network. I am teacher Nicah Santos, and this morning, I will be talking to you about retooling for distance learning in the context of communication arts in English. Right? So, I was told that those who will be joining me today are English teachers from all over the Philippines, maybe even those from abroad. So I welcome you here to our short webinar today, and I hope that you can pick something up from this short presentation that I will be delivering, and I hope to meet many of you later at the question and answer portion. All right. So bago tayo magsimula, I'd like to introduce myself first. Hi. So I'm a high school English teacher, and I have been since 2017. So, you know, hindi pa ako ganun ka-experience in the classroom. So, I hope that whatever I have to share has some value for you today. And I promise to do my very best to impart my experience and insights with you today. So, classroom teacher for 3 years, but I've been an online teacher doing e-learning and e-teaching since July 2020. So our school started, we migrated to online distance learning July this year. So we've been doing that for the past few months already. And along the way, I've picked up some insights and tips that I hope you can benefit from today. As a teacher, I describe myself as fair and compassionate. Bakit po fair and compassionate? Because I always tell my students that they will always receive what they deserve. Meaning, if they need a strict teacher, I'll be a strict teacher. If they respond well to a funny and easy teacher, then that's the kind of teacher I will be. Whatever the students need, that's what I will deliver for them. But I also do that with compassion. So, always with love, always with understanding. Kasi, lalo na sa mga panahong ito, na lahat tayo ay stress, lahat tayo ay nahihirapan in this situation. It's important that we show our students that we love and care about them, even when they're being difficult, or maybe especially when they're being difficult. Alright, so over these past few months that we have been doing online distance learning, there have been three main challenges that we have had to overcome. And I can condense them into these 3 C's that you see on the screen. We have connecting is the first challenge. So one of the things I miss the most as a teacher is being able to interact with the students, getting to see their reactions to our lessons, their reactions to my cringy jokes. Sabi nga nila, sure, you're so cringy. And, of course, connecting in the sense of connecting to the internet. So, hindi laging maaasahan ang internet connection namin dito sa bahay. Kaya, one of the challenges is also getting to class and staying in class with the students. So I'm aware that many, maybe even most of our teachers who are attending this webinar today are not doing online distance learning. They are doing modular distance learning. And I do have some tips for them also today, for you also today. But I'm just sharing my context that part of my difficulties in this situation is internet connection and connecting personally to the students. Another challenge is collecting. So not only staying calm and collected, as in mentally collected, but also collecting assessments of the students. So noon, you could always just run after the students. Sabihin mo, oy, iho, hindi ka pa nagsasubmit ng ganyan, nasa na yung ganito mo. But now, all I can do is keep sending emails, email the parents, email the students, send a message, post something on the PowerPoint. These are the students who have not yet submitted, but that's also not effective. So one of the more stressful challenges for the past few months has been collecting submissions, collecting assessments, and finally, something that is always a challenge for us teachers, but is especially a challenge now, is channeling creativity so that our students will be engaged, and channeling creativity so that they will actually learn, right? We always see on social media these days that, the students are having a hard time learning, or the parents feel sometimes like the teachers aren't really teaching. So we really need to squeeze those creative juices so that we can find solutions to these problems. How do we teach from a distance? How do we engage students even when we're not in the room with them? So I will be sharing my strategies that I have picked up over these past few months and over the years also, that I hope you will learn something from. Alright, so let's proceed. Okay, so I will be sharing 4 sets of strategies that will try to respond to the questions that you sent in before coming to this webinar. So I read all your questions and I saw your concerns. Disclaimer lang po, I'm a high school English teacher, so some of the questions about teaching reading to young readers, I'm sorry to say I don't have that much insight about, but your questions about, motivation and attention, literature and reading, feedback and guidance, and honesty when giving performance tasks, I will be talking about those later. And I will also be providing 2 sets per category. So there will be an online set of guidelines and there will be a modular set of tips. Okay? So later on, I'll be giving you my email address if you have any questions. So please wait until the end of the presentation. Let's proceed. Okay, so first, let's start with motivation and attention, because of course, our students will really not learn anything if they're not motivated and if they're not attentive. So the first set of tips are for those doing online distance learning. So one of my suggestions is to really maximize the use of the tools on your synchronous platform. So whatever you're using for your synchronous sessions, whether that's Zoom or Google Meet, there are features there that you can utilize. Ako personally, I use Zoom. So one of my favorite features is the raise hand feature, of course. So if I will mix it up every now and then, I'll say, okay, for this question, send your answers in the chat. So I should see a lot of students sending answers there. But sometimes I'll also say, please raise your hand and then unmute yourself to answer this question. Or I'll do a group ask. So before, in the classroom, we would say, okay, all together, class, what do we call ganyan, ganyan? Now, if I want them to answer a yes or no question, on the Zoom participants box, there are actually options there for buttons that the students can press, and they can click yes, no, go faster, go slower, and there are other buttons there. So I use the yes and no buttons. So how do I do that? For example, I'll say, if you heard my instructions or if you understood my instructions, could you please click the yes button on the participants panel in the participants box, and I will tally. I will look and see who among my students are not listening or not paying attention, and I'll be able to call on them and be able to verify whether they are with me or not there. So try to get creative with the tools that are at your disposal, especially when using Zoom or whatever video conferencing app that you have. What other features of Zoom do I like to use? I also like ask to unmute, right? So if there is a student whom you feel has not been really paying attention or is not really tuned in, you can click the Ask to Unmute button on Zoom, and they'll get a notification saying, hey, Miss Santos wants you to unmute your mic and recite. So that's one way to get their attention. But another thing I really like to do, which is number 2 here, is to award digital badges for special participation. So depending on what LMS you are using, learning management system you are using, there may already be a built-in digital badge feature that you can take advantage of. So what's a digital badge? I can compare it to giving stickers or giving awards in the classroom, like a certificate. So sometimes we'll have a game in the class, and the top 5 students in that game out of 40 students will get a digital badge for the highest score. Or if there's a student who had perfect attendance, no tardiness, no absences in a whole month, I would also give them a digital badge. Yan. So that's something you can use to motivate your students. For us, it's something simple. For us teachers, it's just, a picture that we will send to them as a form of award. But for the students, they like the feeling of collecting those digital badges and posting them on their student profiles. So if your LMS has that built-in feature, great. If there's no built-in feature, later at the end of the presentation, I will provide links for free websites where you can make digital badges for you to download and send to your students. And then another tip, let me just move my camera, is to be random. Ayan. So, especially during a synchronous session, you can call on students randomly. You can, play surprising music on your laptop or desktop. Do things that will really catch your students off guard and signal to them that they always have to be on their toes. They always have to be paying attention, just in case the teacher does something unexpected or something even crazy. An example of this is what's something that I do that's random? I would I will use a randomizer. I'll use a class number randomizer to call on a student at random. So there's something we already do in the classroom, and something that can be easily adapted for the online context. All right. So enough of that for the online. Now let's move on to modular. So how do we make modular learning more exciting? So think of the homes of the students as their new classroom. So what can we do to make their home an exciting place to learn? So maybe you can utilize objects in the house as part of your lesson. Or maybe you can involve the family as part of your lesson. So there are different ways to think of a physical home as a classroom, and be imaginative in the ways that they can not only engage with the printed modules, but also engage with their surroundings. So this is a good opportunity to get them to maybe help out around the house, or to interview their family members, or maybe to journal and make observations about the things that are happening around them. So by doing this, by integrating their physical surroundings and the things that they are familiar with in the lesson, then you can engage their interest and get them to actually do something rather than just looking at their modules, right? So, and then when the students come to expect that, my teacher is going to give me something exciting, she's going to give me something different, then they'll start to look forward to receiving those modules from you and engaging with them. Okay, next. Okay, so next for literature and reading. So For modular type learning, for, in online, we also do modules. So, let me just stick to online. For online, we like to stick to shorter and simpler texts. We need to face the reality that we can't really tackle novels in the same way that we would before. But that doesn't mean that learning has to be sacrificed. So, we can really dig deep. We can explore a lot of concepts, themes, literary elements, even with short stories, even with short poems. And this will also help us to sustain the students' attention if we use shorter text than what we would usually use in the classroom. I got some questions about what do we do if our students don't have a good grasp of the English language. That's fine. We can provide glossaries and footnotes even if it's in their mother tongue, right? So at the bottom of a page, so you have a story, right? And there are maybe some difficult words, there are difficult concepts, maybe some things that they're not familiar with. So you can add a box at the bottom of the page with the definitions of some words, footnotes for them to understand why is this happening, provide some explanation. And if they really struggle with the English language, there's no shame in them first learning it in their mother tongue, right? So in fact, they will understand better if you give it to them in their mother tongue or in Filipino or whatever language they're familiar with. Because keep in mind, for literature, the skills we are looking for are analysis. We're not doing writing, we're not doing speaking in this particular lesson. So if we want the students to develop skills of analysis, they really need to understand. And if they can't understand the language, we need to bridge their understanding to the language using something they're more familiar with, right? So even if it's just for this time, for this new normal, let's help the students out by giving them what they need in a language that they understand. The students also appreciate when we provide supplementary materials. So what I mean by supplementary materials, you can encourage them to not only read the story, but you can tell them there's no shame in this again. Oh, you can look at Shmoop, you can look at Cliff Notes or whatever websites you have there. So we can't discourage students from using resources that are readily available for them. But at the same time, we also need to tell them that there's no substitute for reading the actual text. You can just use these additional supplementary materials to aid your understanding, to enhance your understanding. Right. Then for modular, since we teachers can't be there with them to guide them through the comprehension, your module should include questions that will scaffold understanding. So I wrote here, scaffold questions for the least, meaning the students who are having the most difficulty to achieve comprehension to the max, right? Sometimes we teachers, we take for granted that the students are not that familiar with how to analyze. They don't have that much practice in how to analyze. So we need to scaffold. We need to break down the questions into more bite-sized, more manageable pieces. For example, the big question that you want the students to answer is, what is the theme in this story, right? Theme is a concept that's a little bit difficult for our students to understand. So before you get to the maximum comprehension to the max, which is extracting theme, we need to build up to that. So what can we say instead? We can start with, how would you describe the character? What did the character do in this situation? What do you notice about the character's attitude? You can also ask, what was the problem? What was the conflict that the character encountered? What did he do? What did he or she do to fix that problem? If we ask these smaller questions and, stack them one on top of the other to arrive at a bigger understanding, then we can help the students, right? We can give them that kind of guidance to lead them to achieve greater things, basically. So, don't be stingy. Huwag tayo maging madamot sa in guiding them even at the smallest level. So, if you think about your students who have the most difficulty, start with questions for them. Even if it's something as simple, what's the first thing that happened in the story? What's the next thing that happened? So that when you get to the end of the module, they have taken all those steps to get to the highest point. Okay, I hope that made sense. Next, I mentioned guidance. So how do we give feedback and guidance? For those who are using an online medium, even though it is difficult, cheers, I know it takes a lot of time, we need to give feedback always and often. So even if it's just a simple question that you posted on Google Classroom that your students gave answers to, it will really help them if you reply and if you suggest ways that they can improve themselves. Remember that every single step of the learning and teaching process should build towards achievement. It should build towards success. So even if you're just asking them to answer a question, it should be purposeful. And once they purposefully answer that question, your feedback should also feed forward, meaning it should push them towards success. If you're also online, make sure you follow up before it's too late to catch up. What do I mean by this? I mentioned earlier it's hard to collect submissions from students. So if you notice that in your record book, in your grade book, that this student has already missed 4 out of 5 submissions, right? Then that's already a red flag. And even that early, even with only 5 formative tasks, there may not even be a summative task yet. Even with 5 formative tasks, follow up with the student before it's too late for them to catch up. Hindi lang sila ang kawawa because they will be left behind, pero kayo rin, cheers, you will have a difficult time trying to chase after them when all their missed work has piled up. So try to nip it in the bud. Catch it before it's too late. Not only to help them, but also to help you as a teacher. And finally, offer options. So I got a question that said, what if a student doesn't ask any questions during class, but it's obvious that they don't really understand? So give your students multiple ways to reach you. Give them many ways to contact you. So it can be using Zoom. It can be using email. If you're willing, cheers, you can also give your cell phone number. Because some students are really just uncomfortable with talking to their teachers on the phone or talking to them on video chat. So make sure you're available. Make yourself available so that your students can ask for the help that they need. Also give options not only in how to be contacted but in how to submit, right? So one of the biggest challenges actually in online learning is teaching students how to submit. Like, they have a hard time figuring out how to do that whole process. So if it's not that much of a hassle for you, teacher, give them different ways to submit in a way that will make it easier for them. All right, for modular, so you may not be able to be there to give them their feedback in person, but as soon or as early as you can, after giving an assessment, whether that is formative or summative, provide a detailed answer key so that the students can compare their own work with the answer key and they can think about their own output and they can think about their own learning. In a way, it's like self-checking. But you have to make it as detailed as possible so that even if you're not there, even if they can't reach you or they can't talk to you in that specific moment, it will be as if you are there explaining to them, why is the answer key like this? Why is this the answer? How can you get to this answer, right? Of course, they can ask you questions later on, but to help them and again, to help yourself so you don't have all these students trying to contact you, give a detailed answer key. And then for students, especially students who, those who are shy to ask for help, or those who don't really ask for help, you teacher can take it upon yourself to schedule a personal consultation. So if you see that the student's work is not meeting standards, or maybe the student is struggling to give his or her best effort. So if you can, maybe you can call the home, send a message, send an email. If the student is within reach, maybe pay a house visit if it's safe. And kamustahin nyo lang, sirs. Sometimes it's not always because they're lazy. It's not always because walang internet. It's not always because maraming ginagawa. Sometimes it can be they're going through something really tough. So if you notice some red flags for your students' performance or about the students' consistency, then please schedule consultations with your students, and let's be there for them. Okay. I think this is my final segment. Yes, honesty. Yay, honesty. Okay. So how do we enforce academic honesty, right? Many parents and teachers are concerned that the students won't learn because they will just Google the answers or they'll ask for help. How do we prevent this from happening? So we start first with the design of the test, right? If we design the test in a way that makes it difficult to cheat, or even impossible to cheat, then we can avoid that problem. How do we make questions impossible or difficult to cheat? Make sure they're not Googleable. What do I mean by Googleable? Let us stay away from the knowledge level and even understanding level questions. Diba? The different levels of questions: knowledge, understanding, application, analysis, synthesis, etc., etc. So let's hit or aim for the higher order thinking skills, because those types of questions cannot be found on Google, or they're difficult to find on Google. And it's easy to detect plagiarism, or it's easier to detect plagiarism with that. If you notice that your students have similar answers, edi alam nyo na cheers na nagkopyahan yan. But in the first place, let's design questions that will really force them to think. Like what? Let's say we have the story A Cask of Amontillado, right? Edgar Allan Poe. Instead of asking, what was the name of the protagonist? What was the conflict of the protagonist? All of that are very easy to answer with Google. But instead, if you ask, would be hard to Google? What is the overall mood and tone of the story, and how was the author able to accomplish that? Right? Okay, let's go. I'll give you. It's really a reality that with famous stories like that, you could Google it. But for a student to explain it in their own words and to really show that they understand what they are talking about, it has to come from them, right? It has to. It can't just be copied and pasted. It can't just be parroted or mimicked from somebody else. Force your students actually to show that they really understand by giving questions that require understanding, not just knowledge, not just give a definition, but explain to me, analyze for me, synthesize for me, right? If we're doing an online mode of learning, we can monitor using the webcam. Sometimes it's not always possible. So this is really the more important tip to remember. Get creative with the test design and the test types. And then for the modular, let us encourage the parents to let's keep parents in the loop so that they can be our eyes and ears. So I'm not saying, teachers, I'm not saying that the parents should be the one to teach. I'm not saying that they should be the ones to replace us as teachers. No. It's something as simple as letting the parents know we have this summative assessment. If you could just, kung pwede nyo lang pong silipin paminsan-minsan yung anak ninyo, mas mabuti. Or if you can ask them or send them a note, send them a letter to say that this is the test that your son will be, your child will be doing. This is what is expected from them. Please, parents, do not help. Let them do it on their own. Something as simple as that, just to keep the parents aware and to let them know what is going on, is a good way to keep the students accountable and to keep them on their toes. Yeah. So, but basically, I think the most important thing with academic honesty is to design the test in such a way that they are forced to be honest. Okay, so my 4 segments are done. You get to ask your questions later. But like I promised, here are some sources that you can use in relation to what I have shared. So if you want to make digital badges for your students, here are some websites that they can visit, that you can use to make digital badges. And then enrichment exercises, I like to use these for when I just don't have enough time to design exercises or materials for a specific lesson. So with Common Lit, this is for reading comprehension. So I use it in a similar way that I would use an SRA. Okay, so you can choose the grade level and the text that your students will read, and then they will answer questions after reading. And then no red ink is for grammar. So if you want to give a diagnostic test or you want to give a test, you just make an account with no red ink. Choose the scales that you want to test. For example, subject-verb agreement, and then the grade level. Send your students the link and they can answer a quiz. You'll see the results on your profile. And then vocabulary.com, as the name implies, is for building vocabulary. Right? It's like flashcard style to help them remember and build their vocabulary. And then for student engagement and attention, for ways to keep them motivated, I like to use Mentimeter. I'm sure a lot of you use this already for like word cloud or taking polls or taking surveys. And then Edpuzzle, I really like to use for asynchronous sessions. So you can take a video and then add questions in the middle of the video. So this is a good way to replace lecture time, like class, face-to-face, synchronous class time. So asynchronously, you can give a video containing the lesson and ask your check-up questions during the video. Yan. These are some things I like to use. Of course, there are many more sources there. And yes, I recognize that these are just for those doing online distance learning. But I think you can adapt some of these also for modular distance learning. Okay. I know I will see some of you during the Q&A later, but if you have any questions and you want to follow up, or if you maybe, I don't know, you want to ask for my slides here, you can send me an email at this email address, npsantos@alum.up.edu.ph. I look forward to hearing from you. Maraming salamat po. And I look forward to seeing you at our Q&A later. Link will be sent to you. Goodbye.